Hi there, welcome back to another video. My name is Monica of Milly and Monica, and I'm a full-time clothing reseller on both Poshmark and eBay. Today, I have a Q&A video for you, so I'm going to be answering all your questions about reselling, about my personal life, more about me, all of that coming up. So, if you are interested in reseller-related content, selling clothing online, and of course, making money online, please consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. And of course, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It truly helps me out here on YouTube. So let's dive in to these questions. These are the most recent questions that you have left me over on my YouTube channel or here on my YouTube channel. You left them in the community comments, and I'm so excited to get after it, into it today, because things have changed in the world since the last time I did a Q&A video. I'll definitely link my other Q&As down below so you can go back and watch those if you haven't already. But we have some great questions here, and we'll dive into, of course, everything reselling, and I'll get to those personal questions as well. So I'm in no particular order going to go through these and see what you have in our questioning. So this first one is a series of questions, and the first one is, are you going to purchase a liquidation lot? And I'm guessing you're referring to those palettes that you see a lot of people buying right now. I'm guessing that's what you're asking. Personally, right now, I'm not looking into purchasing a palette. I have done a little bit of research and looked into them in the past and within the past couple of months. However, you know, just because you see several people talking about it doesn't mean you have to do the same. And as much as I am interested and curious maybe, I don't think they're for me at the moment. You do need to have a lot of money up front to buy liquidation palettes. They are quite spendy, not only for the palette themselves, but shipping and freight. So, and there's a learning curve. So you're going to pay for, you know, a lot that potentially might not be very good. That's part of the learning curve. And honestly, I'm not really willing to invest in learning the hard way at the moment. Next, are your sales picking up? You know, honestly, I saw a small decline in April, and, you know, so far things are just back on kind of track. I am all about consistency. Consistency is, for me, is key, and to be consistent always leads to consistent sales. So I didn't see a major decrease, but that also means I'm probably not going to see a major increase. So that's where I'm at there. Goodwill has opened. Are you back thrifting? No, my Goodwill has not opened. So no, I am not back thrifting. Our Goodwills are open to their employees for training, but they have not opened back up to the public. So that is going to take a couple more weeks. I should mention that it is currently May 21st. So if your Goodwills have opened, awesome. Just know that they haven't opened up for everyone, myself included in that. Let's see if there's any more questions there. Okay, and the next one was, what are your top selling items during this time? So, you know, we have the stay-at-home order, which is kind of lifting. Top selling items, I'm still selling a lot of vintage clothing. I wouldn't say it's a particular item. I sell a lot of denim. I sell a lot of tops. And I mostly vintage, even though I've been listing a lot of stuff from my buyout recently, which I'll link that video if you don't know what I'm talking about. I recently did a large 300-piece buyout of modern clothing, and vintage is still, obviously, for me, I sell a lot of vintage. That's kind of my brand, I guess, that sells the most. Next one, favorite vintage items to sell and pricing vintage items. So let's dive into that a little bit more. If you're new here, I sell vintage and modern women's clothing. I throw in men's every once in a while, but not very often. Yeah, so I really enjoy selling and finding vintage. That's kind of where my heart lies, and I really enjoy the uniqueness of finding and selling vintage items, and of course the quality and just the history and all of that. But I have a couple of vintage videos, so I'm gonna link those too. I think with vintage, the thing is, like, you have to find your niche. And if there's a particular style, era, whatever, that kind of fits your niche, that's probably what you're going to sell the most of. And so personally, I really love selling vintage denim, vintage sweaters, vintage tops. I love vintage dresses as well, but I don't find as many of them. And I've mentioned this in a previous video. I think I don't find as many of them because of where I live. And I think vintage also goes with your region. So I live in Minnesota. It is cold here most of the year. It's really not, I mean, it gets hot in the summer, but we have a short summer season. And so what do I find most of? Denim and sweaters, because it's cold. And so because it's what I find the most of, it's what I sell the most of. As far as pricing, well, it's very similar to how you'd price anything modern or modern brands, except instead of searching the brand, you're searching vintage and the style. So looking at comparable solds, looking for the comparable items. So if you're selling a pair of vintage high-rise mom jeans, maybe they're distressed, search out those keywords, look at similar items, maybe in a similar size, and look to see what they're selling at, because that will tell you where to price, what price point is maybe selling for faster. Maybe if it's more unique, you might get more for it. So you can always look at comparables, even if it's vintage. I know that can be tricky, but you know, do as much research as you can there. Next, do you find having an eBay store is worth it, since returns can be such a bummer and lots of money? Yes, I have an eBay store. I started selling on eBay the end of 2019, like really kind of started to push into it November, December of 2019. Primarily before that, I was just selling on Poshmark. That was my main source of income. And then I branched out to eBay once Vendu, the cross-listing service, made cross-listing so easy. It's kind of like, well, why not? But I do have an eBay store, and for me, selling on there is worth it. I don't have that many returns or return requests. It's very rare. It's very infrequent. You know, I've had a couple things pop up here and there, but it's not that much different than Poshmark in my opinion. As far as, you know, what it's cost me, I guess, in money. It's part of doing business. It's part of selling clothing. You know, I've heard other resellers also point this out, but in selling clothing online or selling clothing in a store, you're going to have people who want to return things. It's a cost of doing business. And for me, it's totally worth it. Let's see, next question. If you could go back to when you first started reselling, what would you have done differently, if anything? I think I've maybe touched on this in other videos, and sometimes it kind of changes, but I think one of the big things is obviously having an inventory system. In the beginning, I did not, because I didn't start with that much, right? So you start with a tote, and then you add another tote, and then suddenly you have 4 bins, and you start moving things around, and then all of a sudden you can't find something. And I wish I would have started a system early on when I went from 1 tote to 2 totes, because that would have made things a lot easier. I do have an inventory video, which I guess I could link as well if you're curious. But anyway, let's move on to the next question of this series. And the next part of this question was, what has been your best ultimate Poshmark sell? I have one particular sweater that's just been my favorite sale ever, and it was this vintage black sheep sweater. So actually it was a rows of white sheep with 1 black sheep, and Princess Diana had worn one similar, not the same exact one, but a very similar one. This sweater I listed for $115, and it sold full price, and that was probably my favorite flip. Not because of so much of how much I made on it, but just because it was such an awesome piece, and I was just so happy to see it sell. And then, what were your previous jobs before reselling? So I've had a few. My main career before reselling, I was an elementary teacher for 4 years. I taught K-1 split, I've taught 4th grade advanced learning, and I taught 3rd grade for a couple years. So that was my previous career. That's what I did. That's what I went to college for. That's what I thought I would do my entire life, until reselling came along and threw me a curveball. So And before that, so I worked in high school. I started working when I was a sophomore in high school as a lifeguard. So I did all the lifeguard training and then started lifeguarding. I worked for 2 different pools in our community in high school and then my first year of college. And then from there, I started waiting tables. I worked at a family diner and also fine dining throughout college. So that's what I've done. But yeah, mainly I had always wanted to be a teacher. And that was my first career. Next, this question is tricky. So what is the value threshold where you don't feel an item is worth your time to pick up? So this is a very personal question, and I know that this person probably just wants to know my personal, I guess, value threshold, but I don't want to tell you that you shouldn't pick something up based on how I value an item. And I think for me, it comes down to the quality of the item versus maybe the value of the item. So if I come across a really unique vintage piece that is of good quality, but might only sell for $15, $10 to $15, maybe, just depending on how long it sits, because sometimes that happens, I'm still going to pick it up because it's unique, it's a great quality, even though I know maybe from past experience it doesn't have a high resale value. For example, some vintage like tops or blouses are just fabulous, and you know they have the great collars and all of that, and they still don't sell for that much. Maybe if I waited 2 years, maybe I would get $30, but ultimately I'm not going to leave them behind because they're great quality, they're unique, they fit my style, they fit my closet. And so I'm still going to pick them up and invest the time in photographing them and listing them and pre-packing them and sharing them and all of that. But just keep in mind that my value threshold can definitely be different than yours. So my situation might look very different from yours. This is my full-time job and I can choose to sell some things at lower prices because it works for me, but it might not work for you in your situation. Maybe Poshmark is a side hustle, it is a part-time gig, and maybe you have decided that you're only going to sell items that can bring you a certain dollar amount, and because that's what you need to make it worth your time. That is your decision, and you have to decide that for yourselves. I can't determine that for you, and so I think that's a very personal question. It's a great question, it's just a very personal question. Next is, how do you decide to price your items? So I guess I kind of already answered that, but yes, I think pricing comes with experience, but it also comes with looking up comparables, sold items, and just doing your research. So you know that it can be tricky and hard at times to figure it out. You can decide if you want to price on the higher end or the lower end. You have to decide that for your own business. You have to play around with it, and you know, time will help you with experience in that way as well. Okay, so I guess I didn't even read past the next part of this question. So it's like, how do you decide how to price your items? I'm a super small reseller on buy-sell trade groups on Facebook, and I'm often faced with people trying to negotiate down. Do you have a bottom line that you won't negotiate below? So I know I just covered comparable sold. I don't sell on Facebook Marketplace or buy-sell trade groups, so I don't have experience with like how to look up comparables there, but I am guessing there might be a way. If you know, you can leave that down below if there's a way to look up comparables on Facebook Marketplace. I don't really know, but if you are looking for comparables, you can use the app called Sellhound, which will give you comparables sold across a few different marketplaces. You might be able to use that to help you price on Facebook Marketplace. As far as being faced with people trying to negotiate you down, I think that's just what comes with reselling items. Unless they're new in a department store, you're going to deal with people trying to negotiate you down. Think about if you're going to buy a new car. Are you going to walk into the car dealership and be like, oh yeah, I saw this car priced at $32,000. Here's $32,000, and not try to negotiate with them? Probably not. So if you're selling something on the internet that's been pre-owned, or even if it does have its new original tags, it's maybe a couple seasons old, you're just asking for someone to try and negotiate with you. Of course, there are those random sales that are full price sales that are awesome, but you know, negotiating is just part of the business, in my opinion. How is your bookkeeping system? I am a pen and paper type of person and currently trying to find the best system for me. So first and foremost, I am not a CPA. I am not an accountant. Highly recommend getting one and figuring out a system that will work for you both. So once you find a CPA, an accountant, however you want to go about that, figure out a system between the two of you that works. Or you can get QuickBooks Self-Employed as your first step and then share that with your accountant, CPA, however you want to do it. But that's kind of the best advice I can give you. I use QuickBooks Self-Employed, which I can leave a link to that down below if you're curious. I believe it's like $10 off. I don't actually know what the deal is on that. But if you use QuickBooks Self-Employed, it helps you with a lot of different things. If you want to use another system to kind of just check that or compare against, I think that's great too. I do have another like spreadsheets, or well, I have a few different spreadsheets that I also use for tracking that my CPA created, or we created together, so that they kind of know what's going on and can easily maneuver through them. So yeah, CPA, get one. That's your best advice there. Hi, what's your all-time favorite flip and biggest, most profitable flip? So I guess I already shared my favorite one. My most profitable was probably this Dooney and Burke bag that I sold for $200, and that was probably the most profitable because I did not pay very much for it. To be real honest, I got a great deal on it. And so that was an incredibly profitable flip, and I literally flipped it in less than 24 hours. Again, I compared my comps. I knew what I wanted. I deferred a lowball offer and held out, and still within less than 24 hours was able to sell it. You know, I don't sell a lot of high-end luxury designer items. So, you know, a $200 flip really quickly like that for me was a great one. I don't mind selling items at lower prices, and that works for me. It works for my model. Okay, how do I handle cases? I have a whole video on that. So I'm going to link you to that because it is kind of a process and something that I talk through, and like I said, have a whole video on, and I think that would be great for you to watch. Okay, would you ever start selling non-clothing items? Yes, and I have. But here's the thing about selling home goods. So when Poshmark first released like the home section or whatever, I did kind of dabble in it. But here's what I quickly learned. I don't have the space. So again, if you haven't watched my Poshmark inventory, like video and office space, you will quickly see that I don't have the room to store home good items. They're big, they're bulky, they take up space, and I don't have room for that. Also, what I learned is that you have to have lots of different packing supplies on hand. And ultimately, I didn't like that. I didn't like to have all the bubble wrap and all the extra filling and all the extra big boxes, because, you know, it took up space to try to store those items and then try to figure out how to ship them. It was not something I enjoyed. If I was ever able to get into a bigger space and have, you know, more room for those items and then more room for the packing supplies, then I would maybe consider trying more home again. And so the next part is I resell part-time and try to have structure, but feel like I am in my technology way too much. I am a fan of sending offers to likers, answering questions in a timely manner, etc. Do you schedule batch of these things to help with your balance? So I am full-time. So there, you know, it's a little bit different for me. So I'm not juggling a full-time job and Poshmark. Poshmark is my full-time job. I do a lot of batch work just in general, like photographing, measuring, you know, all of those tasks are batch work for me. So if I'm photographing, I'm not stopping to, you know, send offers while I'm photographing. Otherwise I get way off track. As far as balance, like I think maybe you're meaning like work-life balance. I don't have that. And I don't know that I've truly ever had that. I've always been a work type person. Again, like I said, I started working as a lifeguard when I was a sophomore in high school. By the time I was a senior, I was working at 2 different pools, close to 40 hours a week while going to high school, while having a college class. That's just kind of how I've always been. While I was a teacher, I juggled other things, and, you know, I was always bringing work home. And then I started selling on Poshmark when I was teaching, and it was always about doing something. I don't like just sitting and watching TV. I always have to be doing something else while I'm watching TV, and I've always been kind of like that. So for me, balance isn't a priority. Like, having a work-life balance is not a priority. I think I've heard other people say it's more of like a work-life integration, and I think that's really how things are for me. Does that mean that I maybe miss out on other opportunities? Sure, but I am an extreme introvert, and I start to realize this more as I get older. I truly value and love my time working alone. I enjoy working. I enjoy the process. And yeah, there's definitely times when I get burnt out. I'm like, okay, I am burnt out. Like, I realize that I'm burnt out, and then maybe I'll, you know, say, okay, I need to take this evening off. I need to actually just sit and enjoy the moment. I think that comes with self-awareness and comes with time. So if you're really concerned about having that balance, and that's something you know you need personally, just from self-reflection and such, then take it. Of course, schedule it, you know, create that time. But for me personally, I don't know balance, and I don't know if I ever will know balance, and that's not something I'm truly seeking. I would definitely say there's other things that I'm seeking, maybe just getting more efficient, or maybe, you know, scheduling a little bit better, or, you know, blocking those times out better is definitely things that I can work on, but I'm not working to find balance, if that makes sense. But I appreciate those who can do balance. So I think that's great. Anyway, I think those are all your questions. If you have any others, you can definitely leave them down below. I'm always up to doing these follow-up videos, and I try to answer as many of your questions as I can. So if you, again, enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. As always, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.